which is escaped from his master unto thee. He shall dwell with thee even among you, in that place which he shall choose in one of thy gates, where it liketh him best, thou shalt not oppress him. Alright, so that's a cut on you niggas. Okay. Alright, I'm gonna read that again. By 1729, the Natchez, along with a number of enslaved and runaway Africans who lived among them, rose up against the French. An army composed of French soldiers, Choctaw warriors, and enslaved Africans defeated them. The Indian wars of the early 18th century, combined with the growing availability of African slaves, essentially ended the Native American slave trade by 1750. Numerous colonial slave traders had been killed in the fighting, and the remaining Native American groups band together, more determined to face the Europeans from a position of strength rather than be enslaved. Many of the Native American remnant tribes joined confederacies such as the Choctaw, the Creek, and the Catawba for protection, making them less easy victims of European slavers. Native American women, whether free or enslaved, were at risk of rape by European colonists. Both Native American and African slaves were at risk of sexual abuse by slaveholders and other white men with power. Okay. It says slavery in California. Slavery of Native Americans was organized in colonial and Mexican California through Franciscan missions, theologically entitled to 10 years for native labor, but in practice maintaining them in perpetual servitude until their charge was reckoned in the mid-1830s. Following 1847 and 1848, advised by the U.S. troops, the native Californians were enslaved in the new state from statehood in 1850 to 1867. Slavery required the posting of a bond by the slaveholder, and enslavement incurred during raids, and a 4-month servitude imposed as a punishment for Indian vagrancy. Okay. Alright. Okay. It says the earliest record of African and Native American contact occurred in April 1502 when Spanish explorers brought an African slave with them and encountered a band. Native Americans interact with enslaved Africans and African Americans in early way possible. In early colony days, Native Americans were enslaved along with Africans, and both often worked with European indentured laborers. They worked together, lived together in common quarters, produced collective recipes for food, share herbal remedies, myths, and legends, and in the end they intermarried. Because both races were non-Christian, Europeans considered them other or inferior to Europeans. They worked to make enemies of the two groups. In some areas, Native Americans began to slowly absorb white culture. Okay, going back to them sowing that discord. Okay, this is common. Oh, should be common, but this is basic history, man. All right, that's the true understanding of Jeremiah 50 verse 33. Okay, when it says, get it real quick. All right, you said I'm trying to make it seem like all the tribes is over here. Well, that's part of the prophecy. Okay, Jeremiah 50:33. Thus saith the Lord of hosts, the children of Israel and the children of Judah were oppressed together. And all that took them captives held them fast. They refused to let them go. Their Redeemer is strong. The Lord of hosts is his name. He shall thoroughly plead their cause, that he may give rest to the land and disquiet the inhabitants of Babylon. Okay, now I ain't talking about ancient Babylon, because there's not one scriptural reference nor historic proof that the 10 tribes of the northern kingdom of Israel went into slavery with Judah, the southern kingdom, under the ancient Babylonians. There's not one documented proof of that. The northern kingdom went into slavery under the Assyrians. Okay, all right. The southern kingdom went completely under captivity under the Babylonians. Okay, that's in the scriptures. So to anybody to that guy, he's going off on that point. That scripture fits America, and that fits the so-called Native Americans and Latinos here in the, on this side of the world, as well as Judah, Benjamin, and Levi. Okay. Alright, but it says in some areas Native Americans begin slowly absorbing white culture. Alright, mainly what you got, like the Cherokee, alright, what they call the 5 civilized nations. That's what they're going to call them. Benjamin Hawkins, superintendent of the tribe south of the Ohio River from the late 18th century, thought the early 19th century encouraged the major southern tribes to adopt chattel slavery in order to have labor for plantations and large-scale agriculture production as part of their assimilation of European American ways. Okay, now if you go into that, alright, which you should do some history on that, alright, because I ain't gonna go into it tonight because I don't have the time for it. I don't want to make this too long. But when you go into that assimilation, basically they were forcing the Native Americans to basically do away with their history, their heritage, and take on the ways of the white man. If they didn't take on the ways of the white man said that he will destroy them. So like these tribes down here, mainly in the south where we at now, they took on their ways. That's why today when we speak about slavery, a lot of those natives, alright, they get upset. That's of the Cherokee, the Choctaw, Chickasaw, Creek, and the Seminole, which Seminoles didn't really practice that custom, but it was mainly practiced amongst the Cherokee and the Creek and the Choctaw and the Chickasaw, that they owned slaves. So, because they was assimilated into the European American ways, alright, by force. Okay. The 5 civilized tribes adopted some practices which they saw as beneficial. They were working to get along with the Americans and to keep their territories. That's the whole main purpose why they did this. Okay, and this was another way that the so-called white man can produce tension amongst the tribes, because they knew eventually this was going to come out. And that the simplicity, and you niggas down here in the South is by far the most simplest niggas on the planet. You niggas is so docile and so easily manipulated into this whole discord amongst the tribes that you won't even go back and do history about that, because it was all due to sow discord. Okay, and they did it to survive. Okay, because if they didn't do it, they would have all got eliminated and destroyed. Okay? Alright? The 5 civilized tribes adopted some practices which they saw as beneficial. They were working to get along with the Americans and to keep their territories. The Cherokee was the tribe that held the most slaves. And like I said, it goes back to them. That's why mainly here in the South, when we encounter Cherokee Indians, okay, for the most part, the majority of the Cherokee Indians I have encountered is either my complexion or darker, or even passed as Negroes, if you didn't know. if they didn't tell you that. Most of them look like me. Okay. Then you have the ones that they dealt, their fathers were, or they, because they deal with the mother line. A lot of them, you got a lot of tares amongst the Cherokee. All right. Which will be, in the proper term, a bastard, because their father's a heathen. Okay. And their mother was an Israelite, so-called Native American woman. Okay. But that seed of that child, meaning the father of that child, was a heathen, so-called white man, any of these heathens. Because you get these nations, they come over here and they deal with our women. They produce these bastards, these tares, these mimzers. Okay. A mimzer young. Yeah, that's how you say it. Alright. They're not Israelites. Alright. But if you had Cherokee men who dealt with white women or any of these heathen women, and they had children, those children are Cherokee because of the father's line, and that makes them Israelites. And I have encountered tares that say I'm Cherokee and this, but their fathers be damn heathens or Edomites. Okay, so you gotta know the spirit, man. And you deal with mainly amongst the Cherokees down here. But a lot of them held slaves. It says in 1809, they held nearly 600 enslaved blacks. This number increased to almost 1,600 in 1835 until around 4,000 by 1860 after they had removed to Indian Territory. Cherokee population for these date are 12,400 in 1809, 16,400 in 1835, 21,000 in 1860. The population of Cherokee families who owned slaves did not exclude 10% and was comparable to the percentage among white families across the South, where a slaveholder entitled owned most of the laborers. So it was only a small percentage that actually owned slaves that was of the Cherokee Nation. Alright? For you simple ass niggas that try to label all Cherokee a bunch of as a bunch of slave holders. It was only a small percentage that held slaves. 10%. Alright? This is the proportion of Cherokee families who owned slaves did not exceed 10%, or comparable to the percentage among white families across the South, where a slave holding entitled owned most of the laborers. In 1835 census, only 8% of Cherokee households contained slaves, and only 3 Cherokee owned more than 50 slaves. So they didn't own a lot of slaves. It says Joseph Van had the most, owning 110 like other major plantainers. Of the Cherokee who owned slaves, 83% held fewer than 10 slaves. Of the slaves' owned families, 78% claimed some white ancestry. Okay? What did that mean? It mean their fathers was with it. Okay? Alright? Okay? It says, of the slave owning families, 78% claimed some white ancestry. So they were terrorists. Okay? They were actually Edomites, so-called white people that might have the appearance of Native Americans. Alright? But they were with what their fathers was doing, because that was in their spirit. That was in their manners, traits, and characteristics, which they inherited through their father, because they are of their father. A tree may be known by its fruit. Okay? For this simp ass nigga, man. It says in 1827, the Cherokee developed a constitution which was part of their acculturation. It prohibits slaves and their descendants, including mixed race, from owning property, selling goods, or purchase to earn money, and married Cherokee or European Americans. It imposed heavy fines on slaveholders if their slaves consume alcohol. No African American, even if free or particularly Cherokee heritage,